Hello everyone, and happy Halloween! I hope that everyone that's into the costume element of Halloween has got their costume picked out, and I hope that all of your Halloween parties are gruesome and in keeping with whatever your state's social distancing guidelines are, and I hope everybody purchased an ungodly amount of candy, because it's 2020 and we've earned it. But most importantly, I hope that you have a good lineup of Halloween films or shows to keep you entertained and scared throughout the Halloween weekend. If your Halloween marathon list needs some substantiating, I am here today to offer up a suggestion. Netflix's The Haunting of Hill House. Now, I know I'm 2 years late on this. I first watched The Haunting of Hill House when it came out in October of 2018, and anyone that knows me personally knows that I was kind of going through it emotionally and mentally during that time. And this show made me feel things when not a whole lot could, so cheers to that, you know? Anyways, it's been out for 2 years, the people that wanted to watch it probably already have, so why even bring it up? 3 reasons. Reason number 1, Halloween spirit. It's time to be spooky. 2020 has been terrifying, and I think that it's our time to scare it back a bit, don't you think? Today I've decided to scare it by drinking an ungodly amount of chai. Take that, 2020. So that's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is I know how long it takes me to watch shows that I'm interested in, and more often than not, it does take more than 2 years. Like, I want to watch Dark. Why haven't I watched Dark? And the final reason is that the Venn diagram that is Netflix original series and quality content is dangerously close to just being 2 separate circles, with The Haunting of Hill House being one of the few shows holding those circles together. So let's celebrate one of the few watchable shows on that platform and give everyone a dose of Halloween spirit. My apologies for the interesting lighting. The sun's making some decisions today. If you've ever watched a really good, bone-chilling ghost story and left it with the following questions, then The Haunting of Hill House would be a great show for you to watch. These questions include, but are not limited to, how big was the protagonist's therapy bill after all of this? How did they cope with the knowledge that ghosts are very real and could go on haunting them for the rest of their life? What did those coping mechanisms look like? And were they able to sustain healthy and meaningful relationships after such a traumatic event? Now, I don't want to send anyone into a bad place mentally, so if you don't like shows that feature drug addiction, lots of familial conflict, complex and varied depictions of grief and PTSD, or suicide, Though may not be the show for you, and that is completely valid. This isn't really the show you binge your way through on Halloween night with a bucket full of candy, because I wouldn't exactly classify it as fun, but I don't think I've ever watched a horror series that embodies that poetic cinema meme as well as this one does. So if you feel comfortable tackling the damaging psychological effects of childhood trauma in the days leading up to Halloween, stick around to find out more. The Haunting of Hill House is loosely based off a novel by the same name, which was written by Shirley Jackson and published back in 1959. It follows the Crane family, a loving, tight-knit bunch burdened with the classic dilemma of realizing that the house that they're going to be renovating for the summer is, you guessed it, haunted. Without having read the novel, I believe that the plot of the book is just the family's experience with the house in that context. But the show builds on the world that Shirley Jackson created by bouncing back and forth between the main characters' experiences in the house as children and their adult lives, which are still being affected by the house that they spent a very bad summer in. The first reason for why I think people should be lapping this show up is the nuanced way trauma is presented across all 6 characters. The horror genre, or just Hollywood in general, is notorious for either forgetting or nixing trauma altogether, or showing a very one-dimensional version of that. They love relying on nightmares and flashbacks, and someone can occasionally have a panic attack provided it looks like every other panic attack in popular media. I'm not saying that those aren't valid symptoms a person working through trauma could experience, but Though does more than that, and it is so satisfying to see. The personality of each character as children impacts how they carry and deal with their trauma into adulthood, and their specific brand of trauma impacts their personality as adults, creating this beautifully complex yet traceable pattern of damaged psyche that, as a writer, made me drool just a little bit. It's especially exciting to see this show's portrayal of trauma because each character is so unique in how they handle it. Luke, the second youngest Crane child, starts using heroin as a young adult to cope with the summer that he spent at Hill House. And when we see him in the present, he's struggling day by day to make it to the next sobriety milestone after bouncing in and out of rehabilitation facilities with varied success. In the first episode, it's very easy to see Luke as the traumatized one, because the effects of his trauma are very obvious, and it's a big ask for Hollywood to have more than one character with less than optimal mental health. But no! His older sister Shirley, who is viewed by all of her siblings as the one that fared the best after everything that they went through, is, at the surface level, handling things pretty well. She's running a successful funeral home, she's happily married with 2 children, and she's done a pretty okay job maintaining relationships with her siblings. But as the season progresses, we get to see that Shirley is trapped in her own addiction. She has a compulsive need to fix everything in her surroundings and live a perfect life as this perfect role model. But it's an unsustainable habit that's eroding her quality of life, just like Luke's drug addiction is ruining his. Another great example of this is the depiction of Hugh, the father of the Crane family, and the oldest child, Stephen. While Luke's trauma grapplings can fit under the umbrella of drug addiction and Shirley's can fit under the umbrella of perfectionism, Hugh and Stephen are both attempting to cope through denial. They're the only 2 family members that essentially have the same processing method, but they differ so much in that sense that they actually butt heads more than anyone else in the show. Stephen is cynical and unwilling to believe that anything paranormal happened at Hill House, and he thinks that his family is doomed because of genetic mental illness rather than supernatural forces. In contrast, Hugh can't stop talking to his dead wife and struggles to acknowledge that his family is broken and really needs him to step up. Stephen finds his father's behavior revolting and has no problem telling him that, and it's so fascinating to watch because they're both doing the same thing, just denying the truth differently. Oh goodness, okay, hold on. I just spilled chai everywhere. Alright, I cleaned up the chai, we're all good now. Each character's reaction to trauma is unique despite all of their experiences in Hill House being pretty similar. And I have to admit, as someone that really appreciates thoughtful character development with a strong focus on the nuance of mental health and the way that trauma affects personality, I found this whole show to be slightly pornographic in that sense. But let's not read too far into that. The acting in Tho is phenomenal. And I know what you're thinking. There are phenomenal actors in every genre of film. That's not a compelling reason to watch this particular show. But would you be more compelled if I said that this show had phenomenal child actors? And I'm not talking about child actors that are really teenagers and are honestly just a few years away from becoming adults anyway. I'm talking about like elementary school kids that are insanely talented. I think we all can agree that actors that young with genuine acting ability are a rarity, which makes sense because they don't have much experience. I don't know where they found these kids, if Netflix has like a secret factory somewhere where they're pumping them out, I don't know. But I do think that the creators helped themselves out a lot by switching up the way the horror genre uses children. If a child in a horror movie is the victim rather than the creepy one holding the knife, they're often reduced down to this cute kid that'll either be paralyzed by fear or cry for help so the adult protagonist can sweep in and save them from all the scaries. They appeal to our parental instincts, but they don't do much else. I'm someone that likes kids, but kids in horror movies are annoying, and I'll be the first of many to admit that. The kids in Tho, however, break out of that mold because not only are they navigating very specific and unique horrors at Hill House, but they're very typical children, outside of how they react to the ghosts that are waking them up at night. There's a brief moment when Nell, the youngest, gets irritated with her twin brother Luke because she thought that his favorite pudding was chocolate pudding, but he has informed her that it's actually rice now, and she feels like he should have informed her as soon as he had decided that rice was better than chocolate. It's such a 5-year-old thing to get mad over, and even though it's literally just a 5-second conversation, it's a great example for how genuinely childish they let these kids be, while still letting them get spooked like proper horror film children. And while the twins are a specific type of childish because they're 5, their older sister Theo, who I've yet to mention, is an entirely different breed of kid. She's that cold, moody kid that you're low-key terrified of because she acts like she knows everything, including the day you're gonna die. Plus, she's played by McKenna Grace, but a brunette McKenna Grace, so you won't realize that it's McKenna Grace until several episodes in, and then you'll feel really, really dumb. It's the hair, man. My point in bringing up Theo is to illustrate how there's actual thought put into the presentation and personality of each child. It makes sense for Theo to deviate from the innocent and naive standard we often see for children in the horror genre because of who she'll become in the future. And the creators have thought about that rather than getting a bunch of kid actors together and telling them to look scared. And setting the groundwork for these child actors to give their characters complex motivations and an array of emotions outside of fear, makes it so the child actors can seamlessly pass the baton to their adult counterparts. It doesn't feel like you're digesting 13 different characters as you jump from past to present. It feels like you're getting a comprehensive look into the lives of 6 individuals whose past is constantly impacting their present, which is a central theme of the show. The child actors taking on incredibly sophisticated roles at such a young age is already noteworthy, but when you see the adult actors using what their younger co-stars put in place and implementing the nuances and the habits and the facial expressions of their character's younger self, we start getting into Oscar territory. It's a beautiful collaborative effort backed up by some very talented people, young and old. Now, cards on the table, I'm not a filmmaking expert. I tend to be more focused on the story than the way that it's told cinematically, but Tho has quite a few notable artistic wins that you don't have to be a cinephile to see. The first thing that Tho is rightfully praised for is its infamous 6th episode, Two Storms, which is a 51-minute episode comprised of only 5 shots. Now you're probably thinking, I've seen 1917. This whole continuous shot thing isn't all that unique anymore. Well, Tho's version of that is a little bit different, because unlike 1917, it's not stuck in one timeline. The jumping back and forth between past and present continues throughout this episode, even though they're filming in 2 different locations and they have 2 different sets of cast members, the old and the young. This required the Tho team to build one set around the other so actors could dart in and out of secret doors and get out of the frame so that the cameras could keep rolling. If one actor didn't get out of the frame in time, they'd have to restart the entire shot, the longest of which was a continuous 17 minutes. They'd also have to start over completely if one actor flubbed a line. And remember, half of the cast members are between the ages of 5 and 15. There's a couple of videos on YouTube that explain how exactly they made all of that work. So if you watch the show and you're interested to see how they were able to practically teleport their actors around set, I definitely recommend Googling those once you've finished the show. But before you get into the behind-the-scenes stuff, it is so fun watching all of the transitions that make those continuous shots work. Also, there's hidden ghosts. I don't know the exact number of hidden ghosts because I know I didn't find all of them. I actually just found out today that they didn't CGI the ghosts in afterwards, but they had actual actors just kind of chilling in the background of several scenes. It's not like hiding some ghosts in your frames is the pinnacle of artistry or anything, but it does give the audience the opportunity to go on a little ghost scavenger hunt every episode, which I really appreciated even though I was really bad at finding the ghosts. Some of them have some really good hiding places. If you appreciate attention to aesthetics, color significance, and thoughtful shot composition, Tho won't disappoint. It hits the perfect balance between form and function, where it unabashedly strives to achieve a gruesome beauty while also slipping a lot of meaning into things like lighting, camera angles, and costuming. It's a show equally made for Tumblr GIF set artists and those that want to sink their teeth into a hearty, character-driven plot. Speaking of the show being made with 2 things in mind, Tho falls into that rare category of film where you can watch it at the most basic level and not put too much thought into it, or you can do the opposite and really steep your brain in symbolism, and both watch experiences will be positive. I see it as sort of a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, you have the most basic interpretation of the show, which would probably be summarized as ghosts, scary, and bad. On the other end of the spectrum, I suppose you would see essays psychoanalyzing characters or breaking down the significance of every shot, which I've seen plenty of online. And the wonderful thing is, you can fall on either end of the spectrum and it won't matter. At the superficial level, there's a lot of familiar haunted house tropes with some good acting and high aesthetic value to keep you invested. There's an element of mystery around the house and what happened on the family's last night at the house, and when a tragedy brings the family back together, they realize that their ties to the house may not be entirely severed. So it's plenty to keep you entertained if that's all you're there for, and listen, in 2020 I completely understand the need to just be catapulted into a different reality where there's ghosts rather than a pandemic. You can consume this show in that fashion and come away completely satisfied with all the chills and jump scares you got out of the experience. But there's plenty more beneath the surface for you to really get your hands dirty with, if that's what you want. There's lots of complex themes, rich symbolism, and masterful character development. So if you want to delve into all of that, you certainly have a lot to delve into, but you won't be forced to digest anything that you don't want to. Watch it however you want to watch it. I've done both. Now, I saved one of my favorite points for last, which is accurate sibling representation. Sibling relationships are whack, and anybody that has siblings knows this. Unfortunately, it seems like a solid 80% of scriptwriters and authors are only children, and it shows. It can be really difficult to convey sibling love in a way that makes sense because sibling love doesn't make sense. Siblings accumulate more dirt, more history, and more reasons to love one another than anyone else. And yet writers continuously do this whole like, hey bro, hey sis thing, and it doesn't make sense. I don't think I've ever called my brothers and sisters bro or sis. I have advanced and mildly offensive nicknames for all of them, like a good sister. Thank you very much. I'm getting surprisingly heated over this. Anyway, back to Tho. I have 4 siblings, and eerily enough, my family's dynamic is almost identical to the Crane family's. The only difference being that my younger brother and sister aren't twins, and we have no ghosts, but lots of pets. I was pleasantly shocked by how realistic the sibling dynamics were. Every relationship is its own relationship, rather than getting this anonymous stamp of siblinghood. It would be so easy to just phone it in on at least one sibling relationship because, hey, they have 10 combinations that they need to develop, and it's hard enough developing one, but they don't phone it in. It's so authentic that for someone that has a family that fits the profile, it honestly feels a little bit violating. It kind of feels like somebody was spying on me for my entire childhood. The relationship between Shirley and Theo, the oldest and middle sister, really stuck out to me because of how much it looked like my relationship with my older sister. Part of me wants to make my sister watch the show just so I can point out how us, Shirley and Theo, are, but there is a scene where Shirley gets so mad at Theo that she punches her in the boob, and frankly, I don't need to give my sister any ideas. More generally, the Crane family embodies a lot of common tropes that you would see in a family with 5 kids. There's the older sister playing the mom, the older brother that just steps aside and lets her because he's more interested in being pals with dad and would rather be the chill older sibling. The moody middle child that's too old to play with the little ones but is too young to be taken seriously by the older ones, so they just kind of stick to themselves. That one's me. And the babies with their lovable quirks that the parents never really correct because they're cute when they're toddlers, and surely they'll still be cute when they're teenagers/adults. Not cute. I understand this may all feel very specific and catered to my own experiences, but I was just so excited to see an actual family dynamic rather than this amorphous blob of a family that I'm so used to seeing in the media. The Crane siblings know each other's oddities and their weirdest fears. They're fiercely protective of one another while also knowing exactly what to say to hurt the other the most. One minute they'll celebrate the ways that their sibling is different from themselves, and the next they'll criticize them for not behaving the same way as they are. They want the best for their siblings while often doubting that their siblings will actually succeed. It's this crazy cocktail of love and hurt and fear and shared trauma, and it's amazing. This show cracked the freaking code that is the insanity of sibling relationships, and it is a delight to watch. And those are my top 5 reasons for why everyone should be watching The Haunting of Hill House this Halloween season. Now, I mentioned a couple of potentially triggering things in this show earlier in the video, but if you look in the description of this video, I'll include a more in-depth list of potentially triggering things that appear in this piece of media. Because I'm recommending you this series, I will be your does the dog die? And the answer is no, no dogs die, but a lot of kittens do, so make sure to check the description if you're worried about that sort of thing. If you liked this video, please go watch The Haunting of Hill House like I suggested, leave a like or a comment, and of course, subscribe. I put out new videos on the 4th Monday of every month / whenever I want to, so go ahead and hit the notification bell to keep up with the content that will be trickling in. Thanks so much for watching, and have a happy Halloween. Ah. Oh. Whoa. I don't know if you heard that, but like, my elbow just...